Okay, we are here today with Mike Leheney, the Libertarian candidate for state treasurer. We appreciate you being here today and invite you to start by providing an opening statement as to why you are running and why you think you're the best candidate for this office.
I'm running because the status quo can no longer do for Illinois. We have dug ourselves into a fiscal situation which is untenable going forward. If we remain with the status quo, we inevitably will hurtle towards bankruptcy, and I want to avoid that. I am striving for a future for not only my children, but all Illinois children and future generations. I want to hand them something better than we were given. I want to make sure that they have opportunities to live in this state, thrive in this state. We have the infrastructure and all the pieces we need in place, and I want to make sure that we put ourselves on the best path forward that we can possibly achieve. I'm running for that reason, and I think I'm the best candidate because, again, the status quo is no longer acceptable. We've handed this office back and forth between Republicans and Democrats for decades, and it's time for something different. It's time for a person who can act as a financial leader in the state, who could partner with the General Assembly and move this state forward. If you're doing that within the parties and the status quo, we're not going to make any progress. We're going to get more of the same. We need an independent financial voice that is not a part of that machine that can help start the path forward. And that's why I'm running.
Okay, excellent. Share with us and our readers a little bit about your professional work and public service and why you think that would be an asset to someone seeking to be state treasurer.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about your professional work experience, your public service, and how you think that would be an asset if you were state treasurer.
Sure. I've spent my entire 19-year career in consulting finance, mostly finance. I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers doing management consulting. Have worked all over the state in a variety of industries. I worked for Baxter Healthcare, Cardinal Healthcare Distribution, Ulta Beauty, so in the retail environment, and I currently work for Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurant. I have spent all of my time working to understand what creates a good business environment, partnering with business partners to understand how to grow businesses, create jobs, create growth, and I think that I can apply those learnings very well into creating policy, better policy in our state. Create an idea, create an environment where we can allow business to thrive. We need entrepreneurs. We need businesses to want to. They want to be here. But the policy that we've put in place is a huge detriment, and so we need to start changing that. We have all the infrastructure, as I said in my opening statement, but we need the right policy in place to allow ourselves to utilize the resources we have.
Okay.
So I'm kind of interested in a different way. So
Sure.
You're a libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a three-part question. So how'd you come to that? How'd you get to be a libertarian?
Absolutely.
What are a couple of principles that you think, from your point of view, define you or define the Libertarian Party?
Mm-hmm.
And then how might those couple of principles apply to your work as state treasurer?
Sure. How I arrived at being a libertarian was probably in the last 7 to 8 years. I found myself finding out more about the Libertarian Party. I had bounced around with my political affiliations and always considered myself mostly an independent. And I still somewhat do consider myself an independent. I consider myself an independent thinker. I find that my ideals most closely align with those of the Libertarian Party. I think that there is a place for government in our society, and it serves a useful purpose. I'm not on the farthest extreme of the fringe Libertarian Party. I'm a very pragmatic libertarian. I think we have to work from where we are. The ideals that I hold are that we need to be as responsible as we can with the taxpayer dollar. We need to not overburden the business environment with too much regulation. We need to not overtax our people and our businesses in this state because they are the drivers of the economy. People's lives get a lot better when they're making a fair wage, when they have a good job. A lot of the other problems that we tend to disagree on and argue about, start going away a little bit. When people aren't worried about putting food on the table, making their next month's rent or their mortgage payment, making their car payment, everything else gets smaller in comparison, or it becomes more manageable. But there's a lot of rhetoric out there that keeps us away from that purpose, and it's because we're not being presented with a lot of solutions out of Springfield right now, and that's on purpose. It keeps the power within two parties, and they like it that way. We need to start doing something different. What we've done, the status quo has gotten us to a $200 billion plus debt. We have unfunded liabilities within our pension system. We have broken policy here in Illinois. The state is shrinking. We went from the 5th largest state to the 6th largest state. It wasn't because our states are just growing faster. It's because people are actually leaving. Businesses are leaving. And they're leaving because the opportunities aren't here. And that's sad. I want to fight for Illinois. I like being here. And I want my children and everybody's children to have the option to be here in the future. If we don't fix things, we will hurtle towards bankruptcy. And I don't want that to be the next step in Illinois' future.
So how would those 2 or 3 or 4 principles that you mentioned play out when you're elected as state treasurer?
Yes.
How would they?
So I look at the treasurer's office as two-pronged, in my opinion. I wish it wasn't this way. I think the ideal role of the treasurer is to be the prudent manager of the taxpayers' funds. Mm-hmm. It is the basic blocking and tackling of the job. We have to prudently manage the funds, serve as a check and balance to the Comptroller's office, and make sure that we are just, in a good financial situation from managing the cash flow. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where I feel the treasurer probably needs to go beyond that. I think the office needs to have a financial leader in it. I think we need someone who can partner with the General Assembly and with the governor to create better policy. I think we have to realize that we're not always electing people who know how to put together a financial forecast, know how to create sound financial policy. We do it every day in business, right? We have marketing departments, we have HR departments, we have all these departments who you have to work with as a finance partner to help make sure that your company is on a sustainable path. That's what I want to do. And I want to hold people accountable when they're not. So if they're not willing to partner and create fiscal policy, we need somebody out there saying, hey, this is what's going on. We need to make sure that we're educating the people of Illinois and where the General Assembly is falling short. And right now, in general, they're not willing to do that. We have whoever their treasurer is falls very much in the party lines. The only times you ever see them, out in the public speaking, it's always against the other side. We've got to end that rhetoric. That's where an independent libertarian viewpoint can come in and partner with both sides. I think there's great people on both sides of the aisle, and we need to seek them out, work with them to create responsible legislation. We've got to show them that they don't have to be beholden to a party boss to depend on re-election. But that's where we need to partner with the people to show them progress, and then it gives them the power to elect people who will act responsibly.
Good, thanks.
Okay. You brought up now twice you'd be afraid of the state hurtling toward bankruptcy. It's not possible for a state at this point in time to declare bankruptcy. So I guess explain how that would be possible, or what you're saying when you say that, what you mean.
We say it's not possible because I think what you're referring to, there's an amendment in the Constitution that says we can't declare bankruptcy, correct?
That is what I'm referring to, yes.
That's true. So from a technical standpoint, at this point, we couldn't declare bankruptcy. When the money runs out, I don't know what else you're going to call it. Unless we're going to all of a sudden raise tax rates, which of course are the usual ideas coming out of Springfield, unfortunately. We're proposing a progressive tax, we're proposing a mileage tax. It's always a discussion of how are we going to raise revenue. We need to start the conversation of how are we going to control our spending? How are we going to reform the programs that are out there or cut the programs that are out there to responsibly get a budget put together? I mean, the elephant in the room, and everybody knows, we have a pension problem in this state. It's half of the problem at this point. Yet there's no appetite, because it's politically untenable, to reform the system at all. It's $125 billion roughly unfunded. That's crazy. Not only are we making promises to hardworking state employees who are going to go without, at some point, the system will run out. We won't be able to afford those pensions. And so what we're selling them is in essence a lie. We're promising them something that we will have no way to keep, because the tax base simply will run out. We won't be able to do it. The rates you would have to charge to make it tenable are unrealistic. And as soon as you put those in place, the tax base will then again shrink. We will continue, we're putting Band-Aids on the problem instead of fixing the problem. And those Band-Aids are laced with poison. We're only making the problems worse. When we start increasing taxes again and again and again, and we're one of the most taxed people in the nation already, this is not a revenue problem. It is a spending problem. I want to make sure that state employees get a safe retirement, that they're paid what they are due. But we need to make sure that we're calculating it in a responsible way. And it seems like common sense, but we haven't gotten that, and I want to do better.
So have you considered some common sense ideas relative to the pension issue?
Sure, yeah. I think the idea would be you could model it a lot. Yeah, of course. The treasurer can't implement a system on his own, right? But again, we can provide a plan and provide a path and partner with the legislature to make sure that we can create a path that's sustainable. I think the idea, and it's a pretty simple one, is much what the private sector has done. You have to go toward a defined contribution system rather than a defined benefit system. And then you're paying for it real time. You're making, call it a 403B or a 401k style of system, and allow people to save, tax-free towards their, or tax-deferred towards their retirement, just like anybody else would. It's something that most companies have gotten away from, nearly all companies have gotten away from, because they realize that it's not a long-term, financially sound system. So we need to move towards something like that, because then an individual owns their retirement. They see the balance in their account on a daily basis. Right now, it's off into the ether. It's not getting funded. We're making promises, but we're not keeping them. We need to convert away from that system. And I think it's a slow roll. People have earned pensions. We need to find a way to pay for those, absolutely. I don't want to take anything away. I don't want to cut anything from people who have earned something that they've been promised. But we need to find a way to stop the bleeding and then start converting the system.
That's good going forward, but that still leaves us with the unfunded liability that the state has, which is, depending on the figures, we've heard anywhere, as you said, 125 billion to over 200 billion, depending on your source.
Yep.
Do you have ideas of how we could pay for that without raising taxes? It's
very slowly, and we're going to have to look at a lot of programs in the state.
Okay.
We need to turn over the couch cushions. We have to find dollars and cents everywhere we can, and I think a large part of that is start out with a balanced budget, right? Like, we're adding to the problem every day. If we can balance things, it may take us a long time to get there, but we will get there. I think ratings agencies, we're the lowest bond rated state in the nation. That's a problem. And I think a big part of that is our pension problem. If we can start to change that conversation, then the ratings agencies have indicated it. If we can fix the pension problem, even if we're not able to fund it right away, they would probably look at that very favorably. And then as your rating starts increasing, you start saving on bond rates, on things like that, where we're going to be able to start reallocating money that we're currently throwing away and slowly build that system back up. It's not going to be an overnight solution, but it's something we have to start working towards. If you have $100,000 in credit card debt, you're not going to solve that overnight. You start it by creating a budget, saving a little bit at a time, just like an individual would. We're operating on a much bigger scope here, obviously, at the state budget level, but we have to treat it more like because it is our money. We have to treat it like it's our own money, like it's our own finances. We need to treat it more responsibly, because right now, our representatives are not doing that. They're treating it like their own funny piggy bank, and that we can't do that anymore.
Right now, the Treasurer's Office doesn't really play a role in the budget.
Correct.
That's a General Assembly and Governor function. Do you think it's something the Treasurer should have a say in?
Again, I don't think the Treasurer, in an ideal world, the Treasurer shouldn't be involved in those conversations.
Okay.
We're at a point in this state where the Treasurer needs to be involved in those conversations. So again, if we can put this state on a more sustainable path, I would happily back out of those conversations. But right now, we need somebody who is taking the forefront, acting as a financial leader for the people of Illinois, being their advocate, because right now nobody's advocating for them. We have parties who are advocating to their chosen interests, their special interests, and nobody's really looking out for everyone. The overall view of Illinois.
Okay. The current state treasurer, Mike Ferricks, is in office since 2015. What specifically has he done that you applaud?
I think some of the tweaks he's made into the investment strategy overall have been good. We increased returns. Again, we're in a fairly bullish market right now, so I don't know if part of it's going to be that. But again, he made some strategic investment changes that were great. I think overall the program he has put together isn't terrible. We've reduced some of the fees that we were paying into. I think there's room to go. He has increased some of the transparency. He's improved the treasurer's website. Again, I think we have a long way to go. I think we need to be able to produce easily digestible reporting around the programs and around the state's finances so that the average person can go easily educate themselves on where we stand. So I think he's done a little bit of that. I think we have much further to go. But no, overall, and when I think if I was to go into office, the overall investment program, I would probably make tweaks to, not overarching huge changes. And I don't think there will be a difference between either of my opponents and me, largely, when it comes to that. I think you will see similar returns because I don't think with state funds there's an appetite for a huge increase in risk, which is how you get a lot of your return, right? You have to take risk to get higher returns. With state funds, I don't think that's necessarily an appropriate place to do that. Would I like to be slightly more aggressive than we are now? Yes, I would. And I say that only because I think some of the returns we're getting on some of our what are typically considered more conservative investments are actually at more risk. We're getting a lower return than I think the true risk profile is. So when you look at some of our investments in federal T-bonds, things like that, I think when you look at a federal government that's over $21 trillion in debt, there's probably a little more risk there in the long term in some of those rates than we're accounting for. So I think that we could be a little more aggressive on other ones where we appropriate the risk profile a little better. I think we could probably drive a little bit higher returns. I also want to attack the fees that we're paying. We've made a little progress there, but I think there's still room to go.
What type of fees are you talking about?
So a lot of the investments that we do, we're contracting with firms, the big banks and a variety of firms, venture capital funds, things like that, where they're charging us a fee to manage the funds of the state. I think we have a reasonable fee structure, but I think we could probably do a little better. We have a huge amount of funds going through these banks. I think we can probably leverage that to get better returns.
You already answered my next question, which was what changes, if any, would you recommend in how the state invests its money? Are there other changes you would suggest in how that office is run? That office has other programs besides just investing.
Yeah, there's a number of programs going through there, and I think a lot of them are good programs. Ideally, in a really, really long-term scenario, I think a lot of those programs would eventually go away. I think the problem is we have a lot of programs in place to solve for other problems that we have with our economic setup. Things like we're coming out with, the Bright Start program is great. It's a tax-free way for people to save for college. What's wrong with that? That's a great thing. I think that we could create mechanisms that could do that in the private sector more efficiently. But again, I'm not going in there trying to cut the Bright Start program. It's working. It's great. I think the Secure Choice program, which is being out there for small companies, on its face is a good program. What's wrong with small companies who don't necessarily provide a 401k for people? You want their workers to be able to invest, and that's great. But the problem is it what our state elected officials should be spending their time on? Probably not. Any of those employees could easily go out and open a Roth IRA at any point. There's private alternatives to this. My opponent says, well, you have 50% of Americans who don't have $5,000 saved for retirement, and that's true. But again, we're putting a solution out there for a problem, to me, that isn't the real problem. The problem that those Americans don't have money saved for retirement is because they don't have money left after their paycheck at the end of the day, not because they don't have options. Any one of them could walk in, open a Roth IRA tomorrow, done, if that was the only issue to saving for retirement. It's not. The fact is, we need to create an economic environment that creates higher wages. We need to create better job opportunities for people. That's what we need to be attacking. So it's a little bit of, yeah, is it a good program? Sure. I don't think it's a bad program. But I don't think it's something that we would need if we were doing the right things.
Okay, fair enough. There is a push to combine the offices of the state treasurer and comptroller, or are you in favor of that?
So both my opponents support combining the offices. I am on the other side of that. And I say that in our current environment. I think the idea behind combining the offices is great. We want to create cost savings. Absolutely. I think we can do that without combining the offices. I think there's a lot of shared services between the two offices. I think there's a lot of areas that you could attack within the budgets of those offices where you could create efficiencies between the offices, and we need to do that. I want to attack that, and I think I can lower the overall operating budget of the treasurer's office. The reason I don't want to combine the offices in our current environment is, first, I think it's an important checks and balance. Most companies that you have out there have a separation between their accounting and finance function at some level. And we need to be able to make sure that things like that happen in Dixon, Illinois, when you have one person overlooking both sides of it, your $52 million went missing, right? This is one way to help ensure, it's not a foolproof plan, but it helps ensure that that kind of thing can't occur as easily. Secondly, I don't like taking away an elected position from the people of Illinois. It's somebody that they can hold accountable. I think in any plan that I've heard discussed at this point, you're going to have savings, but you're going to end up with more appointed positions. Those tend to be tools of the politically elite who can hand out jobs to people. That's not what I'm striving for. I want people who are accountable to the people of Illinois. And so while I'm all for the cost savings, I think there's some serious obstacles to combining the offices. If we can address those in a plan responsibly, I could support it. But I think with the history of, politics in Illinois, it's a little dirty. And I'd like to keep those positions in place to help try to stem the tide of that game that's being played.
I would play maybe devil's advocate a little bit with
Sure.
and say the cost savings would outweigh those concerns. Do you disagree?
Right now, yes, because like I said, I think the cost savings we can largely get without combining the offices.
Okay.
There's a number of offices around the state for the treasurer's office. There's a lot going on in the comptroller's office as well. I think there's plenty of low-hanging fruit where we can go and create some of those savings, create the efficiencies, because the idea is, right, we're going to create overhead. So what we're at the end of the day talking about is overhead. So buildings, can we share a printer? Things like that. And then at the end of the day, there's jobs on the line, right? Like, are there overlapping duties? Because the programs right now, they're not going away. Like, we still have to manage all the programs. So first, I hesitate when numbers are thrown out. I've seen estimates from $12 to $14 million we're going to save by combining the offices. I think the treasurer's most recent operating budget that I saw was closer to $8 million. So if you wiped out that office entirely, you're talking about $8 million of savings. So where these numbers are coming from, I'd like to go through those with a fine-tooth comb because it sounds more like a political promise come election season than it does actual dollars and cents. But I'm open to seeing it. I'm open to talking about it. But there's, like I said, there's plenty of low-hanging fruit. We can attack savings, and we should be aggressively attacking those in every budget, from Secretary of State to Comptroller to the Treasurer's Office. Everywhere we can do that, everywhere we can create efficiencies, everywhere we can combine functions, we should be doing it. Absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the things, and this clearly isn't part of the treasurer's job, but you made the comment about that you wouldn't like to remove an elective position.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the kind of, everybody runs to the fact that Illinois has so many units of local government.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you stand relative to consolidation of those functions of government? And frankly, that would remove or could remove a lot of locally elected positions.
Absolutely. And for me, yeah, we have way too many taxing bodies in the state of Illinois. So I'm all for consolidating positions as appropriate. I don't think in this position at the state level that we need to necessarily do that. I think that's too critical of a distinction between those roles to do it. I think we've created plenty of redundancies down below the state level, and we need to effectively consolidate those, address those, which could take away elected positions, absolutely. But again, it's accountability, and that's what it's about for me, is making sure that there are people who are in those positions who are accountable to their electorate, right? So within the municipalities, yeah. I mean, how many school districts and layers of school districts that we have, that administrators on top of administrators, and we're not getting any better results. There's plenty of room within budgets throughout the state that we need to attack those things, and I'd be happy to work through all of that, just as the financial leader of the state, absolutely.
Sure. I was on your campaign website and looking at the issues you would want to tackle as treasurer, and you said your first step would be create true transparency in the financials.
Yep.
Explain what you mean by that.
So I think what we need, and I referenced it a little bit earlier, but I think we have a long way to go as far as the reporting that's available to the people of Illinois, allowing them to understand what's happening with their money, allowing them to understand what programs are working in Illinois, what programs are broken. And so I think we need somebody who is an independent financial mind assessing those, putting out a report on how it's working. Frankly, I think I'm the only person on the ballot running for treasurer's office who can do that effectively, because I think I'm the only one who can adequately be looked at by the people of Illinois as truly an independent mind. I'm not a part of the major two parties. I'm here truly just representing the people of Illinois. And so I want to be able to say, this is what's happening from an independent perspective, and evaluate program by program. Here's what's working, here's where it's broken, and putting out solutions. Here's what we could do to fix this, make it more sustainable. Or is this program not effective at all? Could we cut it entirely? And that's where it's just going literally program by program and trying to give them an insight as to what's happening in Illinois.
For just those under the purview of the treasurer's office, or are you talking throughout state government?
I would start within the treasurer's office, and then as much as I could. And again, that's a huge undertaking. There's a lot of programs out there.
There are.
But yes, I would try to expand it and do that beyond just the treasurer's office. And that's where it's, again, creating that partnership with the General Assembly. I want to make sure that when we're creating programs and policy, that the finances of that policy, the long-term impacts of those policies are kept in mind. I want them to say, hey, the treasurer is going to report on this. I want to bring him in early in the process and make sure that that report's going to be favorable. Because if we do that, if we can create it from the get-go as responsible, then we don't end up in the mess we're in with pensions and things like that. If we would have thought about the long-term impacts of the policy we were putting in place up front, and, nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect. I claim I've never nailed a forecast 100% at any job I've ever done. But you get within the ballpark. You use the learnings that you have to create responsible policy. We should have known, years ago, that this pension program was going to do what it did. It wasn't a mystery to anybody. But we did it because it felt good, and it bought votes. And, we can't operate under that system anymore. We can't afford it.
Okay. You said your second goal then would be, and you've touched on this, to craft relationships with the General Assembly to help them create fiscally responsible policy. Yeah. You'd be approaching lawmakers that you do not share the same political beliefs as. You've sat here and said, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. How would you build that coalition you need in order to get this?
Passed? I think one of the huge challenges we face in Illinois is that there are a lot of good people running for office, and they get into office, especially and I'm one of the first-time candidate, right? I think people get into office with the most optimism they can have, and they're going to change the world, right? And they find themselves beholden to party bosses, to the leadership of the party, and are asked to toe the line. And we need to show them that they don't have to do that, because they're worried about re-election, right? And that's a natural concern. They're looking out for themselves to a certain degree too. We need to show them that by working with someone who's not on the other side, right? I think the feeling we've built is that there's only two sides, and they're all pointing at each other as being the problem. The problem that we've gotten into, they both work together to create. But I think there's good people within those parties, and I want to seek them out. I want to find them. I want to convince them on a daily basis that you don't have to be beholden to party interest. What you can do is do the right thing, and the people of Illinois will respect that you're putting in place good policy and fighting for good policy, and will reelect you based on that. It's a tough message to sell, right? Because for a long time, we've been electing people largely because most of the state leans one way or the other. And people vote out of fear. That's just the reality. They fear the other side so much that they have to vote for their guy. You don't have to look past our current governor's race and our last presidential race. I think a lot of the votes that went to both sides were so fearful because the other person was so bad that they voted for the side they just typically lean to. We need to do better than that. The best of two terrible options is still terrible. We need to think of voting for the best candidate and think about the long-term impact that will have. If we just start putting the right people in place versus the safe play, because it's not safe. That's the safe play is what's gotten us to where we are. Again, over $200 billion in debt. That's the safe play. I'm missing something then.
So without major party backing,
Yep.
And kind of a hard-scrabble campaign.
Yep.
So how does, and as a guy that's working for a living,
Yep.
right? So how do you do that?
It's rough.
Do you take a leave of absence? How
Ideally, I can't afford to do that, unfortunately. But
so you're on your lunch hour?
So yeah, no, I was on my laptop till 15 minutes before I got in here, processing wine orders and things like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, it's tough. It is tough, But what we need to do is, I think we have an opportunity like we haven't had before. I think with social media, I think communication, I think getting their message out there is easier than it's ever been historically. Historically, you needed a lot of money to get your message out there. And it's not to say that, our current governor candidates aren't doing that right now. They're spending countless amounts of dollars to get their message out there. But I think that's changing. And it's a tide that's growing. More efficient ways to get your message out there, especially through social media, and a lot of it's pounding the pavement. Like my kids and my wife miss me a lot right now, and I miss them. But it's tough. But it's a fight worth fighting. I'll be honest. When I first got asked about running for this office, I said no. I said I've got an 11, 9, and 5-year-old at home. They're more important to me than anything. I don't have time for it. I like being a dad. But the bug was planted, and so I looked at it, and after a while, my mindset changed on it. Not that they became any less important, but because they are so important to me, because I want to create a future for them. I felt like the time is now. We're not far off from fiscal catastrophe in the state. We have to be honest about that. If we want to create real change without the state going through some form of bankruptcy, the time is now. We can't wait any longer. And so I was compelled to say yes and run for this office, and I'm glad I did. It's traveling around the state and talking to people. I wasn't the only one fearing it. I think the fears are widely held. People see what they're taxed. We see what we're getting. We see economic opportunity disappearing all around us, and I'm so glad, because I know now I'm not alone. The people of the state want more. Now this message I have to get out to them is, how are we going to do it? This is step one. I need to get elected into office. I need to be the treasurer of this state so that we can start the fight, because it's going to be a long battle. But we have to start somewhere, or we won't get anywhere.
All right, well, we thank you for meeting with us here today, and we invite you to give a brief closing statement as to why you think you should be the next treasurer for the state of Illinois.
Sure. I truly believe that I am the only option on the ballot who will bring change within the treasurer's office and with the fiscal situation in this state. It's been proven over decades that we will not get any change with the status quo. We are going to get more and more into debt. The situation will get worse. Jobs will go away. Taxes will increase. Businesses will flee. It's untenable. As an independent financial leader in this state, I will take the treasurer's office to unprecedented levels. we will be a true financial leader and a true partner to the General Assembly in creating a better path forward. I am completely confident over my 19 years that I have honed the skills to be able to be that business partner to the General Assembly, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. I'm up for the fight, and I would appreciate your support.